Spring of 2025, Venus retrograde, Mercury retrograde. We have a total lunar eclipse, a solar eclipse, and Neptune is entering into the sign of Aries. This is one of the craziest months of astrology I have seen in so many years.
Lasky is a spiritual teacher specializing in astrology, tarot, meditation, and sacred ceremonies. He is the founder of the Society of Awakening Souls, the Aquarian House of Astrology, and the Cacao Men's Circle. Hi friends, we are so excited to be here with you. I am here with Nick Lasky, an amazing astrologer. He's definitely my go-to person every time that I'm looking at the cosmos and it's like, what is happening up there? So today we are going to sit with a cup of cacao. You're more than welcome to have a cup of tea or water and to chat about what is happening out in the cosmos. So thank you, Nick, for being with us.
Thank you so much for inviting me to this. I'm super happy that we can connect with a cup of cacao and dive into my favorite subject, which is the cosmos. Because honestly, the astrology of the month ahead is so wild. We need to have this discussion, and especially in a way that is going to really offer some empowering tools and ways to navigate some crunchy, interesting energies over the next month and even few months. But first, I think let's connect with the cacao.
Let's do it. So let's bring our cups of cacao into the heart space. If you have a cup of tea, that is perfect as well. And we'll close our eyes, just taking a moment to give our gratitude. In gratitude to this beautiful plant that has been so supportive to so much of our community here at Cacao Laboratory and also has helped Nick and I build our friendship in many ways. There's been many cups of cacao shared together. And thank you to each person that has allowed this cup of cacao to be in our hands today. May this plant allow us to really speak from the heart and receive the necessary teachings that we can share with you all to better understand our relationship between ourselves and the earth and what we can do with all of these sacred instructions. So, just taking a moment to set your intention. And when you feel ready, you can blow the intention into your cup. And we can take our first sip.
Mm.
Where do
Mm,
we even
mm.
start? So, as of today, we are moving through many different changes, from what I
Mhm.
understand. We have an upcoming full moon and so many other pieces. So, take us away, Nick. What should we be really putting into our focus in right now?
Yeah, so it's interesting. The next few weeks, and right now, by the way, we're recording this, and it is what? It's March 11th, March 12th. So right in the middle of March, the second half of March into the first half of April, this next month, is so wild in terms of astrology. It has been a very long time since I've seen such wild, astrology. You would be hard pressed to see such dynamic, dramatic shifts all happening at the same time, and that's our next month, which is why we got so inspired to share something and share some tools to help navigate this period. So, of course, right now, Venus is retrograde. In a few days, Mercury is going retrograde on the 15th of March. As you mentioned, on early Friday morning, the 14th, we have a full moon total lunar eclipse in the sign of Virgo. 2 weeks from now, on March 29th, we have a solar eclipse in the sign of Aries, the last of the round of eclipses in Aries. And then last but not least, if that isn't enough, the planet Neptune is changing signs on March 30th, and it's entering into the sign of Aries from Pisces, where it's been for the past 14 years. So for those of y'all that have heard of, and have focused on Pluto going into Aquarius and this big generational shift, age of Aquarius, like Neptune going into Aries is just as big of a deal. Slightly, I mean, just one little peg back, but it's in that category of like huge paradigm shift. So We have a super full plate. The plate is overflowing, Florencia, with everything that we have coming up. Um, so let's dive in with the eclipse. I think we'll just go in terms of chronological from, depending on when we get this posted. Um, so the first big thing is it's 2:56, no, 2:54 a.m. Friday, March 14th, and that is East Coast time. We have a total lunar eclipse. It's also referred to as a blood moon. Yes, the moon will appear for about an hour, like that kind of reddish orangish, very interesting, auspicious, spooky kind of color. And so we're in eclipse season. It begins with this lunar eclipse in the sign of Virgo. And so, what are lunar eclipses? This is the best place to start. They're full moons. You can think of them just in the same way we think astrological full moons, heightened times of energy and awareness and emotion. It's a time of culmination. But an eclipse means the shadow of the earth perfectly is blocking the light that's reflected on the moon. So it's like a dimming happens of the moon, and then we get this really cool effect with the light where the moon actually starts glowing bright red. But energetically, eclipses, and so like to put a whole kind of framework to this time period in general, all of these, so many of these things, these astrological unfoldments, speak to this month. These next 30 days is a big period of reset. This is a huge time of shift, of change, and especially the kind of change that is rebirthed, that is renewed, that is coming in some new manifestation. And the big key, I want to say, is about action over these 30 days. There's going to be a lot of energies in the world, in the collective, but also in our own personal lives that inspire us to take action. So let's dive in a little bit with this lunar eclipse. It's in the sign of Virgo, the maiden. That's an earth sign. And it happens to be exactly opposite the planet Saturn, which is the structure or the boundaries or the limitations. Saturn is the cosmic no energy, the energy of contraction. It's also opposite, the eclipse is opposite Neptune as well, both of them in Pisces. So we're talking about the Pisces Virgo axis. Some of the keys for this lunar eclipse, it is it's the balance of what is real and what is delusion or what is fantasy. What is the truth of what's going on, maybe in my own internal world, versus what I've cooked up as a story or the pattern that's been playing on and on, but ultimately it's not true. One of the biggest things that I think this eclipse is a great opportunity for is clearing out old structures, patterns, and habits that keep us limited, especially with things like self-deprecation, not believing in ourselves, not believing in our vision, not believing we're not good enough or don't deserve whatever for, love or money or success or health or whatever it may be. But this is a really great opportunity to do some big cleansing. I really think about it like, the solar eclipse and this Neptune going into Aries, like we're talking big shifts. So this next 2 weeks is a really great opportunity to kind of cleanse, prepare, allow yourself to really edit. Virgo, as we all have wonderful Virgo friends, we love you, Virgo.
We love
Uh,
our Virgos.
we love our Virgos. They keep us organized. What do we do without Virgos? Um, They love to edit. They love to keep things clean and tidy most of the time. And so this is a great opportunity energetically to edit, to cleanse, to purify, okay, our mind, but especially our when bringing in the energy of Saturn, our habits and the structures we have in our lives. Okay? And I want to bring a big focus to health, to mental health, to our attention and our awareness. Like in this social media, fast-paced, crazy world that we live in, like our attention is one of the biggest commodities, right?
Absolutely.
And so our habits, and like I just, took 6 days off for the 5 day YEB period, the Mayan New Year, where I just totally unplugged. And I went off. Basically, my phone was off. All I was doing really on the computer was writing, but I was totally unplugged. And I noticed a very substantial difference in my ability to be with myself and just be still and not be reaching for, even music or, checking what's on my phone or all the different things, right? So this is a great opportunity these next few weeks to really tune in. What are the habits and patterns that we have that we need to get rid of? If it's constantly checking social media, if it's constantly reaching out to somebody, if it's constantly watching things or unhealthy habits, could be food, it could be so many different things.
I love what you're sharing. I've been having this deep calling of creating structure within the new systems that I'm inviting into my world. I'm training for a Spartan race, and I realize, you know,
Yes.
so much fun, and I've done them in the past, but this time my approach has been completely different where instead of going as hard as I can, I'm creating structure. So seeing where my blind spots are and bringing stability to that. So I feel it's been really beautiful to understand how can I implement that in all other aspects of my life. And then with the clearing, when you were mentioning that, I kept thinking about a practice that my mom always shares when it comes to rebirthing, breathing modality, which is purifying the quality of our thoughts, because our
Mm.
thoughts are creating our reality. So if we're waking up, maybe doing our meditation for 30 minutes, but then we're constantly putting ourselves down because that's what has been passed down through our generation in order to show up in an ambitious way, it blocks us, right? So something that my mom does is writing 5 to 10 of our most negative thoughts at the end of the day and rewriting them to create the rewiring. But it's not just writing them down and being like, oh, that sounds a lot nicer. It's like writing them down and sitting with them until we embody the frequency of what that would represent. Right. So it's not something that's outside of us, but like, how do we begin to integrate that thought into our reality?
I love that. That is so perfect and so Virgo. Virgos love lists. So if we can make a list of our most negative thoughts, right? Virgos love that. But then let's edit it. Let's improve it, make it better. That is such a perfect, wonderful practice. Uh,
Yeah, and one other piece, sorry to interrupt you, but one
yeah.
other piece that keeps coming up for me is resistance. Where's my resistance in the process of the commitments? Like creating content for me is so fun, but sometimes when I have to do it for some of my brands, it's like so overwhelming that I get stuck. So I've been observing like what is the resistance around that? Where is it in my body? And as we start calling this law of attraction, instead of just seeing what we want to call into our lives, how do we create our environment to match the lifestyle of what would it would take for us to embody those experiences? And a simple way of doing that is understanding like, oh, I'm feeling like frustrated. Where is the frustration in my body? Maybe it's in that space right underneath our ribs. It feels like a ball is there. Okay, maybe I can bring in the breath, or maybe I can bring some acupressure, just gently massaging that space. Because when we have an experience, it stays with us on a cellular level. So it's a great time to reset our bodies.
Yeah, totally. And this theme of resistance and our relationship to resistance is perfectly reflected with this lunar eclipse because, as I mentioned, it's opposite Saturn, and Saturn is the archetype of the opposer or the limiting or the place where we think we can't, or the structure that of the end, the wall, right? And so that's resistance. And being opposite that, it's like we get to see our resistance, our relationship to resistance. And so this is a wonderful time. I mean, as I was like really diving in, I was doing the artistic entrepreneur, like business incubation group container for 5 months. And one of the biggest things that I really took away was about my relationship with resistance, my resistance to resistance, probably, my relationship to resistance, and really leaning into it. Getting really curious about it when it shows up, when I'm feeling uncomfortable or frustrated, and not wanting to then distract myself from it, which most of us tend to do, and we do it in ways and with things that we don't even realize. We're like on autopilot. But when you get curious and you're like, ooh, I feel that resistance. And just like you said, where is that? That's such an amazing practice. And really, this lunar eclipse is I want to say, reflected astrologically, a great opportunity to reset your relationship to resistance, to your relationship to things that are difficult, to what you perceive has been limiting in the past that maybe is not going to be limiting in the future. It's up to you.
I love that so much. It seems like it's almost like, sometimes astrology can feel very, very heavy because it's like all of these things are happening at the same time. We have an interesting relationship, most of us, with Mercury in retrograde and all of these different things. But when we actually look, like even in the Mayan Cosmovision, you brought up the Wayeb, which is known as time out of time, a moment to really reflect what has served me in the last cycle, what am I bringing into this new cycle, what do I need to really bring awareness of my mistakes, not to bring shame or guilt, but to acknowledge how I can show up better. I feel like astrology is a really powerful ancient technology that can allow us to understand how do we move with the cycles of nature to be driving, like use them as a catalyst to move us forward, not to get us stuck in our own way.
Thank you for bringing that up, Flo, because there is so much wild astrology happening, and there is a little bit of fear mongering going on out there. And astrology is a tool that is meant to help us. Yes, with it, we can see things in the future. We can see how energy dynamics are going to unfold. However, is it helpful if that then makes you afraid and contracted and like, nervous to go out of your house? No, not at all. Right? So we see some crunchy things in the future, and it's also very easy, just as we know, like the social media algorithms love uh, anger making things, fear thing, like posts that elicit negative emotional responses because that's what makes people engage the most, right? We're emotionally kind of like get more excited over like terrible news rather than, oh my God, 10 puppies were born and they're all wonderful, you know? So astrology, a better way of relating to astrology is, okay, I have some information. I understand some energies that are unfolding and how can I, as a conscious creator of my life, co-create with this experience? Like, I know I'm going to do the Spartan race. For instance, you're going to do the Spartan race. You can either just show up there and dreading it the whole way, never having trained once, or you can train for it. You can get really into it. You can do cool challenges. You can bring friends in with it. Like, the Spartan race is the astrology, but how you navigate it, what you do, what you put into it, how you relate to it, that's our part.
I love what you're sharing so much, and I feel this gives us the opportunity of understanding this is the time that we've been waiting for, if we choose to have it be, right? Because for me, the Spartan race, it's creating such a drastic change in how I wake up in the morning, what I'm putting in my body, how I'm spending my nights because of the next morning. So it literally created a whole shift of my lifestyle. And hopefully it's not just for the training itself, but really creating an everlasting change. And I can already see within a few weeks of that. So if we can utilize like the gifts of astrology, of why is this happening for me, right? An opportunity to clean and reset and use that amazing ambition of our Virgo friends to learn like structure so we can find the fluidity in these times where everything just feels so all over the place. What a gift it is to say like, hey, as a collective, let's organize our house. Let's figure out what goes where.
Totally. I love that. That's a great phrase for this lunar eclipse. Let's organize our house. Okay, so wrapping up with this eclipse, one other key that I will say for this lunar eclipse is the contemplation of how can I cultivate simplicity? How can I simplify? That's another big thing that's been coming up for me. Like, okay, where am I doing too much? Where am I working too hard? How can I simplify? really great with this eclipse. And also with the patterns and structures, three things to really contemplate. Which ones do you need to let go of? Which ones do you need to renew? Which ones, old things like I used to meditate every day for 30 minutes, or I used to, go to the gym every day, and now, oh, I've fallen off it. Like, right? So, which ones to renew? And then, are there any new patterns or structures or habits that are you really want to bring in that are going to support you in your vision into the future?
I have a question. I hope I'm not deviating ourselves too much, but we hear a lot of the times with the full moon, what are you ready to let go of? Right? It's a great question, but how do I actually implement that? And I love that you mentioned simplifying. Like, how does somebody make an everlasting change of letting go?
Mm-hmm. Okay. So, if we want to talk about the mind, there's a wonderful man by the name of Dr. Joe Dispenza who somehow kept finding his way into our YouTube call or like our conversation with strange ways. But so, in my experience in being in a transformational wisdom school for over a decade and doing all kinds of rituals and practices, doing something in the physical plane so much supports any intention that you have, if it's internal, if it's mental, emotional. So, one of the things, because everything in the physical plane has a correspondence on the astral plane, right? The non-physical and the physical are married. They're interwoven, right? So, when you're trying to let go of something, what is one of the easiest, most practical things you can do? Let go of something. Like literally get rid of stuff. So Virgos love this. Virgos love to clean all the time. So one of the things I recommend around this lunar eclipse, especially the days leading into it, the days afterwards, is clean. Take stuff out of your closet. Take everything out. Clean. Donate. Get rid of old clothes. If you have old electronic equipment, like we have, as technologies evolve, we, accumulate things. What is it that, in your home, your car, your office, etc.? Like, what are literal things that you can get rid of or donate or give or sell? Um, and then, and so you can dedicate that to an internal desire of something you want to let go of. Like I want to purify self-doubt. And so then for the next 2 hours, as I'm cleaning my closet or cleaning my room or cleaning my bathroom, that, I'm smudging or wiping the mirror clean or like scrubbing off stuff of the shower or whatever. Like you can dedicate that to an internal intention of releasing, of letting go of something. So that's one of the coolest things that I like to work with.
I love that so much. And maybe it's like visualizing, like, okay, as I'm putting in the house cleaning, this is representing this pattern, or this is representing that pattern. And I feel when you're letting go, also, I did a lot of that this last fall. And I've had so many people say, like, Florencia, like, there's something that you're doing. I can see the change. And I feel it's like there's a very like instant moment that we might have a choice of going back to our old story or choosing this new paradigm and finding a certain tool that says I'm not going to make that phone call to my ex-boyfriend, or I'm not going to, go and eat those chips. It's like, what is like your mantra in that very moment to say I am in this new paradigm, that old paradigm is no longer in existence. So maybe that could also be part of the list that is being created.
Totally. And that's such a Venus retrograde thing, relationships coming up from the past. Don't call your ex-boyfriend unless he calls you first. Just kidding. One thing with that is actually physical things. Like I love crystals. So if you have a specific intention, like you remember not to, eat the fudge that's in the fridge at 2 a.m. before you go to sleep, right? Having a bracelet or some specific crystal or something that you can keep with you to remind you of your intention, that's really cool too.
I love
Okay, let's keep it rolling. Let's go to basically in the same day, within the same 24 hours, Mercury goes retrograde. So we have a lunar eclipse, and then exactly at 2:46 a.m. East Coast time on Saturday, March 15th, Mercury goes retrograde, right? So almost a day later, Mercury goes retrograde, which, by the way, Mercury rules the sign of Virgo. So Mercury going retrograde is totally woven into this eclipse energy. So for those of y'all that are new to, most of us have heard of Mercury retrograde, and you probably heard how terrible of a time it is. And you get to blame Mercury for everything that goes wrong. And so there are some classic funny things that tend to happen with Mercury retrograde, which is weird things with communication, with technology, maybe with cars or travel, um, digital things. But why does this happen? And what is really going on? Because it's honestly a great opportunity as well. Pop culture has kind of taken it and run with it and turned it into the boogeyman. Uh, and maybe, culture needs a boogeyman, right? But so when a planet goes retrograde, it appears that it is moving backwards in the sky. It is moving backwards through the zodiac. So I don't want to get into a whole long discussion, like explaining all of it, but Mercury is not actually moving backwards. It's not suddenly changing directions around the sun. It just appears from the Earth that that's what's happening, that it's moving in an opposite direction that it normally moves. And so when a planet goes retrograde, you can think about it like this. It's very simple. When a planet is direct and not retrograde, its normal function is expressed outwardly. When a planet goes retrograde, its urge, its function gets more shifted inwardly, right? So Mercury is the communicator, the connector. And when it goes retrograde, suddenly the outward communication, sending emails, recording things, doing all kinds of communication and technology things, suddenly there's more of an internal focus. So it doesn't necessarily flow as smoothly externally, right? But it is not something to be afraid of. In fact, it's an opportunity to slow down, to retreat a little bit more, maybe to turn your phone off a little bit more, um, maybe to meditate more, to journal, to have any practices that bring you into self-reflection and contemplation. That is what Mercury retrograde is all about. It's a time to revisit as well things from the past, all the rewords, reorganizing, restructuring. Like we're slowing down before we move forward again. The other big note about this is, I'll just throw this in now. The so Mercury's going retrograde at 9 degrees of Aries, which, by the way, happens to be 1 degree away from where Venus went retrograde and where Venus basically is right now. So the Venus and Mercury retrogrades are synced up in where they're happening in the zodiac. And so, just to note, we'll go into this a little bit more. If you have any planets or any important things in your chart in late Pisces or early Aries, that is where almost all of this stuff is happening. And we can go into that about how to find that out. But late Pisces, early Aries, that's what's cooking.
I feel for me it's a little bit confusing of like what is the difference between your house being in that particular planet versus your zodiac sign being in that particular planet.
Mm-hmm. So, um, with houses, so for those of y'all that are not familiar, we have planets. All the planets around us, around welcome to astronomy. Uh, Planets go around the sun, right? Well, from Earth, we then separate the heavens into 12 zodiac signs, okay, which are based on constellations. Um, but so the planets can be, will be in one of the 12 zodiac signs. However, we add another layer of specificity, which is where you are on the earth or where things are now in relation to like the exact location that you are on earth at any given time. That's why when someone's looking up your astrology chart, you have to give the where were you born? That's to calculate the houses. And so the houses further split up the visible sky, the invisible sky, everything that's on the other side of the earth, where it's dark, the other side of the world. Um, and so planets are in signs and in houses. And there are, to potentially confuse a little more, there are different kinds of house systems. There's different ways of organizing the houses. For instance, the one that I use is called whole sign houses. And so a house will be 30 degrees and will correspond with one particular sign. There's other house systems that the signs aren't exactly lined up. And so you'll have like half of a sign in one house and half the sign in the previous house, right? So I don't want to overly confuse or get too much into that, um, that it gets confusing. But if you can, and you can reach out to an astrologer, you should be able maybe just to find it online, or they have different apps and things that you can look it up. But wherever you have Pisces and Aries in your chart, the houses, if you have any planets there, that's where the bulk of this action is taking place.
Amazing. Beautiful. So tell us a little bit more about this Mercury and Venus going retrograde.
Okay, so that's Mercury retrograde. Venus has already been retrograde. Venus is retrograde. Venus goes retrograde. So Mercury goes retrograde for about 3 weeks, right? Mercury retrograde is ending on April 7th, okay? And it will change directions in late Pisces. Venus has been retrograde since March 1st, okay? And Venus goes retrograde almost twice a year, just a little bit under that, for approximately 40 days and 40 nights. So I could talk a long time about Venus retrograde, but the simplified version is that 40 days and 40 nights that is referred to in so many literature and especially religious scriptures, um, Moses and Jesus and the Buddha and Noah, 40 days and 40 nights. That is actually a reference to a Venus retrograde cycle, which is an epic opportunity for spiritual practice. In fact, there's some spiritual schools that will use that 40 days, 40 nights time period for a deep, deep, deep spiritual practice. Sometimes it's referred to as a chilla. But
Yeah, I feel like doing a Kriya for 40 days. I wish I would have known to start March 1st. I've been feeling really called to working with a Kriya, but I wonder, is it better to do maybe 21 since we're closer to that at this point? Or,
I think you can do the 40 days now. You know,
beautiful.
started on the eclipse on Friday.
I love that.
So Venus going retrograde. Venus is the goddess. Venus is the archetype of love and sensuality and relationships and beauty and pleasure and desire. At its core, Venus is our urge to relate. And so many things get associated to Venus. But to keep it simple, when Venus goes retrograde, it is a 40, this one is about 43 days. It's not always exact. This is a tremendous opportunity to recalibrate our relationships. This is a classic time, by the way, for relationships to get a little wonky and funky and people to come in being like, Nick, what's going on with my relationship? And I said, Venus is retrograde. Um, and that is part of the program. It is a time to question things, to question your values, to question, is this right? Does something need to change? And it's way beyond just romantic relationships, friendships, working relationships, family relationships, your relationship with objects, with physical things. And so it's a time to review and revisit which people, which relationships are worthy of my time, which relationships do I need to maybe cut ties from, which relationships need mending or healing. Do I need to, like, ooh, I really need to apologize or make amends here, or I really need to call this person out and tell this person how I feel, or you know, um, or the values or what we're calling in regards to relationships. So many people that are seeking partners, like this is a great opportunity to really, really get clear and define what it is that you're looking for.
Yeah, this is very interesting because I often feel that relationships, again, like intimate partnerships, but also friendships, they're almost like we meet at a crossroads when we're both in this process of walking our path, and we meet maybe for a short period, maybe it's for a long time. But as we were mentioning, this process of rewriting our story, cleaning up our house, and really editing our life, it's so important to understand who are the beings that are nurturing or malnourishing our life and our path and our creative expression. So to be able to be truly honest with ourselves, like, is this relationship honoring my growth, or is this keeping me projecting back because it's not about, the other individual, but like, is this relationship projecting back a moment of getting stuck or creating more resistance within my life?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And, you know, one of the things that I do recommend is like a practical advice for um, especially partnerships, romantic relationships during this time. Oftentimes, it is better to take space than to make final relationship decisions during a Venus retrograde. Oftentimes, like breakups, this is a classic period for breakups and separations, right? Or divorces. Um, but obviously, many relationships make it through. This happens every 2 years, right? But it is better generally to like take a step back and retreat rather than try and figure everything out externally right now. Like, you got to go within because the archetypal journey of Venus retrograde is the goddess going into the underworld. If you've heard of the myth of Inanna, this is a Sumerian goddess who went down into the underworld, and each step of the way she had to shed something, some possession. It was clothes, it was shoes, it was her bejeweled crown until she was naked. And that's symbolic for being pure and like having no luxuries, having nothing but just the pure soul, right? To then emerge, to be rebirthed, more powerful. That's what this Venus retrograde is about. Also, the myths of Persephone going into the underworld and rising out. All of these goddesses going into the underworld to purify, to emerge with greater power and authenticity and truth. And so that then gets applied to our relationships, and as I'm in alignment with my truth, maybe this relationship isn't serving me in the way that it was. And so maybe I cut it out. Or maybe it's just we meet together once or twice a year for lunch, and it's not we're talking all the time. I do believe to the point that you were saying, the aphorism about we are the five people that we spend the most time with. I totally believe that. I mean, you become who you spend your time with.
Yeah, it's very interesting. As you know, we have a cacao apprenticeship program that's about 9 months long, and there's so much that changes within relationships of those who go through the process, because there's such a big revolution that you go through in this 9 month. It's not just learning about cacao, but really like an internal process. And a lot of times, it's easy to be like, this person is just not understanding me or not showing up. But on a vibrational level and also on a spiritual level, it's just you were walking a very similar path, and then it kind of like open up, and you all of a sudden you're across the street from each other. And it doesn't mean that either person is right or wrong, but you're just kind of walking on different streets. So I think it's important to, what when if we do choose to walk away, really like having like a cord cutting, or really like taking a moment to acknowledge the beauty and growth that came from that relationship, rather than just saying this person is like terrible for me, because they made us who we are in one way or another. So how can we honor them but also honor the grieving process of, okay, I'm across the street now.
Yeah, and whatever taste you have in your mouth towards that person, if you cut things off, like you leave with that and you carry that, even if you're not connected with them. So the memory, the visceral, emotional, mental associations, right? So if you can shift it to what you said, like, oh, rather than I'm resentful and like, bye, Felicia, and I never want to see you, but like I'm grateful for how you showed up in my life because you taught me this. And that's the vibration you can carry when you think about somebody 1,000 times better.
I love that. And I also love what you're saying about the Venus going into the underworld. I do feel that there has been a lot of initiation for so many of us internally, and to honor those moments. And as you gave yourself, these 5 days of really going inward and reflecting, it's so important to create that space within our lives right now, because there's so much external distraction that can take us away from truly understanding the gift of the moment.
Totally. Did you have, and so purification is such a big thing during this period. Do you have any specific rituals or practices that you recommend for that folks can do for that?
Yeah, I think there's a couple that are coming to mind. I mean, as soon as you started talking about Venus, I like reached over to my copal and I like started cleansing. That definitely wants to come through. I feel like using plants and using, these cleansing tools are really important. Always understanding that the sourcing of whatever it is that you're using. And the Kriya too. I all of a sudden picked up my Kundalini book and started working on a Kriya a few days ago, because purging internally and purifying internally is so important. And then plant baths. There's a beautiful bath that is sweet but also cleansing, that is orange peel, which activates joy. Like the essential oils of citrus are always activating joy and happiness. So bringing in that purification from that softness with honey and rosemary and basil, that combination is really allowing us to kind of purify. But also sometimes we think about cleansing. I come from like a raw food background where, you detox by juicing and fasting, and that's great too. But in the last couple of years, I realized like life doesn't need to be so hard. So how can we, make it exciting, making it fun, making it indulging? And that's what a plant bath can really do for you, just like immersing yourself in this like purification.
And when okay, so you get, just so folks are clear and I'm clear, you get the honey, you add that to your bath, maybe some essential oil drops or maybe some peels of orange, and then rosemary and then basil, and you just like sprinkle that in the bath.
Great question. I normally will steep it. Traditional plant baths will be steeping, depending on the person and depending on the tradition. You steep it for different amounts of time, but I like to do about 20 minutes. You make almost like an infusion out of the orange peel, and I would just use one orange, like the peel of one orange, or you can use about 11 to 22 drops of orange. And you can also use essential oil for rosemary. But if you have, pure, fresh, or dried rosemary is also good. So getting everything for 20 minutes, steeping it, and then you can add it to your bath. But I normally like to strain it before I put it in my bathtub. I used to just throw everything in, and I
It
realized
gets
like,
hardcore on the drain.
yeah, it wasn't a good
Yeah.
time afterwards.
Yeah, I've also done the baths where you put everything also in like the herbs in a cloth bag, like a cheesecloth bag kind of thing.
Yeah, but it's nice to make it super potent and then you can add more water. And some of us are like, great, that sounds beautiful. I don't have a bathtub. I'm in New York City, or I'm in a city where it's just like all I got is a shower.
Yeah.
That's beautiful. You can still make it and then just pour it over yourself. That's what we do in the Amazon. That's what, sometimes in the Andes it's done. Sometimes I have to do it in my own shower. So, yeah, making it practical.
I love that. I love that. Okay. So, and Venus, by the way, is retrograde until April 12th. And I want to also make a distinction of so Venus is retrograde through the sign of Aries, but we'll dip back into Pisces on March 27th. Venus goes back into Pisces. So there's again this like Aries Pisces energy, and Aries is the feisty, fiery, go-getting, action-driven, assertive energy, and Pisces is the very spiritual, blasé-faire, go with the flow, very sensitive, watery. So pay attention at the end of um, March. We're gonna see like this big shifting energy, and it's very interesting. Neptune and Venus will be trading places, and Mercury, because Neptune's leaving Pisces and going into Aries. Venus and Mercury are coming back from Aries and then are going into Pisces. So there's going to be this funny kind of switcheroo that happens. But especially the end of March, be aware of like major shifting energy dynamics.
And what would be an example of that? Like what can we potentially experience where we see it and we're like, okay, this is all the planets going cray. So I'm just gonna sit back and take a few breaths.
hmm So, Venus, wherever Venus is how we tend to, it's our social urge when we're relating with people. So, while Venus is in Aries, I don't know if you've noticed this, and folks that are watching, maybe you've noticed this as well. Venus entered Aries on February 4th. Since then, so basically February, when we're like connecting with people, there's more of a fiery, like, I kind of want it my way vibe, like trying to figure out my independence, my assertiveness, Venus in Aries is like Xena, the Princess Warrior. She's hot and sexy, but like also carries a sword, and she'll chop. So like Venus in Aries is very, and we're seeing that kind of in the world right now, like a very like in relationships and dynamics, it's very like F you, or no, like this is my way, or we're doing it my way, or no, I'm doing it my way. Like, and then that's an Aries energy, right? It's like I'm in charge, I'm the leader. Pisces, on the other hand, is much more like go with the flow, spiritual. Let's look at the big picture. Let's feel into things. Venus in Pisces is very empathetic and compassionate. Venus in Aries is not at all. Venus in Aries is like we're doing it my way. Venus in Pisces is like, what do you think? Okay, let's do it. What works best for everyone?
I do feel that there's been, and maybe this is just my personal experience, but I do feel it's been more of a time where normally I'm like a super social being, and I've been feeling very much about like, I just want to hone my own energy. I'm very choosy about going out and like, do I really gotta go to this event? Should I really host this ceremony? Do you feel it's also the energy of these different planets?
Yes, 100%. I've been telling everybody, my students, people that like I'm in hermit mode right now. I'm writing. I'm like really saying no to a lot of different things. Don't take it personally, but that's what's happening. That's what I need. And so I would totally attribute that to, you've heard of probably the shadow period of Mercury retrograde, which is a little bit of pre-hangover and post-hangover of Mercury retrograde. Venus retrograde has the same thing. And the pre-shadow period of Venus retrograde really began in January, you know? So for the past several months, there's been this like preparing for this underworld journey, which kind of is like step by step bringing us more into ourselves. So I've been totally been doing that.
Yeah, I feel that. It almost feels like there's an initiation, like a graduation kind of energy and like prepare. So what are we preparing for?
Great question, Florencia. What are we preparing for? So, well, let's keep things rolling. So we have a solar eclipse then that happens on March 29th. But the bigger theme of what are we preparing for? So, okay, let's catch a couple stones all at the same time. The solar eclipse on March 29th is in Aries. Solar eclipses are new beginnings. They are major rebirths and resets. Think of solar eclipses as super powerful new moon, but it's in the sign of Aries. So some major reset about action, new energy, independence, self-determination, sovereignty, like doing the thing, being the pioneer, going for it. What is something that, there's many things that'll be coming up for all of us. Like, this is what I want to do. I don't know that's ever been done before. How do I do it? Like, well, I'm just going to figure it out, right? That's Aries. It's like, I'm just going to go for it and figure it out. Then on March 30th, Neptune goes into Aries, which is a very big deal. Neptune changes signs every 14 years. Neptune has been in Pisces since April of 2011. Okay, so for the past 14 years, there's been this energy. And Neptune, by the way, is the planet that rules the collective dream, the vision, our ideals, like what this collective spiritual urge. So that's shifting into Aries. So there's all this momentum happening into Aries as we get towards the well, now and towards the end of the month. And that spells action. Okay, so what we're preparing for is action. This is a time, this is a season, springtime, because also later in May, Saturn joins the Aries party. I believe, let me just make sure it's exact, that on May 25th, Saturn joins Neptune in the sign of Aries. So there is an increasing polarization happening in many ways on the planet right now. We see it politically, we see it like country-wise, we see it economically, we see it in perspectives and all kinds of things, right? And we also see that things are heating up, right? And so one of the biggest things that the springtime is really inviting us into is action and to taking action and being in alignment, taking action in alignment with your truth, right? As things heat up externally in the world and the news, etc., what I would really recommend is let it inspire you to take action. It is not necessarily the time to just be a bystander and observe and in any way feel like a victim of circumstance. Like, oh, that sucks. That's happening. I can't do anything about it, right? Well, maybe you can't do something about that specific thing in this moment because of your position, or you're not a government official, or you're not, in some high level where you can organize so many people. But what is something you can do? What action can you take? Who can you talk to? What can you do? What can you organize? What can it is a time to take action. And so this purification period that we're in now, we'll call it that, is to make sure we're ready, to make sure we're ready when the moment comes. We don't know exactly when. Different things inspire different people to action, right? Some people like get really charged over very specific things, while other like, but maybe something else really makes this person upset, and then suddenly they're like, oh, well, I'm hold up now, like let me take care of this. So it's being ready to take action and not coming from a place of fear or limitation or I can't or I'm a victim, right? Aries has the power, has the autonomy, and so that's the bigger preparation.
I love what you're sharing here. I think it's so important to really use our creative expression and to see this as a playground, right? I feel ever since I started working with Cacao Lab and seeing what the name is, it's an experiment to understand how do we bring these different qualities to heal the system within the system. And there's been so much activation that has taken place also with, our community at Florecer of like having a dream and not letting it just be something that we imagine, but what are the necessary steps? Like, what's the very next step? And it could be a vast dream. Like, we're working on so many different projects with different people in our community. And I feel sometimes we think we have to do it all alone. But this is an opportunity to really come together and not seeing it as a limitation, but seeing what's the gift for me, what's the opportunity for growth. Any of the moments that there was big external challenges in the world throughout history, that's where the biggest artists and the most revolutionary leaders were born, right? And when I see a lot of, I love listening to different people that have reached success, not just financial success, but success within their field. Love myself some hip hop. I love, different like entrepreneurs that have really made it. And a lot of the stories, they come from a struggling past life, and it doesn't mean that we need to struggle in order to have a new life or a new dream. But as we see everything crumbling, this is the creative life force asking us to really step in out of the darkness, right? And even as you're mentioning, it's almost like a story that I'm hearing of like, clear the way forward, observe what is the gift. Now go through your hero's journey into the underworld. Now that you've made it and you are seeing how powerful you are and the resilience that you carry, what is your dream? And what are you ready to bring to the world as a legacy for the next generations that are coming?
Totally. And I would double down exactly on what you just said about motivation and some of the most amazing epic success stories, sports, music, politically, and the actors, whatever. Like it is that grind and the suffering almost that can be such an epic motivation to prove something, or that becomes the fuel that ignites the fire of like wanting desire to achieve or to excel. And so this is something that I've really contemplated over the years of like, okay, so how can I create that same level of motivation without needing to be in a position of grinding and suffering? You know what I mean? So that I like, how do I create that fire and get so in touch with my pure desire that I then am motivated every day to pour myself into my work or into what it is that I'm trying to create? And I think for many of us, it's, part of that is like really getting in touch with what is the thing that I really want to create or pour my energy into, because there's layers on top of the dreams that we have maybe are actually society's dreams, or something we saw in some movie, or some our parents told us this is what you should do, and that's, or we see it on social media and we compare ourselves, and that's what I want because that's what this person has that I like, right? So I think a big part of it is really getting in touch with your own personal dream. And this is such the Neptune and Aries energy, because Neptune is the dream and Aries is the self, right? So what's your hero's journey? What is it like when you really tap into the spiritual motivation for your dream, for like what it is that you want to do in life, in the world? Where's your motivation? Where is that coming from? And if you can really get in touch with like going through a purification process, going through the underworld journey to get to the depth, I think that's what, the dark night of the soul kind of experience, that's what it does for us. It's like a forest fire internally that then gets to the core of something that you then, once you've really connected with it, you're like, oh, right, that's what I need to do. But sometimes it takes a burning to get there.
Yeah, I love what you're sharing. And I feel with Cacao Lab, when we first started it, I had just left my marriage, and I felt like I had nothing to lose. And maybe that's what it is that creates such big ambition when it comes to certain leaders. It's like because they have felt in a way like, I don't have anything holding me back. All I have is this delusional idea that keeps me motivated to move forward. I agree with you 100%. Now is for me is like I use that same ambition that I had to create new things, but I do notice like my hesitation is a lot bigger now than it was when I was like in my, mid 20s. I'm like, I mean, it doesn't work out, it doesn't work out. Where now it's like I can feel like my ego being like, oh, if it doesn't work out, there's a lot of eyes that might see that, or there's like time and space that I'm missing. But I feel if we can implement the full trust in the co-creation with the universe, it's such a beautiful gift that we can receive. And embodying, it's like we see the dream, we have the dream, live it. It's literally you wake up every day as that dream is your reality right now. And so what does that person do at every moment that is carrying that dream? Now I have a quick question for you, and I think this is a difficult one to answer, but
Boy.
well, because some of us may not know what our dream is. And so
Yeah.
in these times, like how can we use all of the energy that is moving through to say, okay, I have no idea what my dream is, but I'm ready to have it be something. What
Mm.
advice would you give to that person?
I love this question. Okay. So, firstly, a very practical hack, okay, for figuring out your dream is find someone who 100% knows what their dream is, who is 100% on mission, on purpose, they're living their dream and they're on target with that, and help them. Be in that vibration. Ask them what they can I help? Can I support you? Is there some way I can be of service to you in that? Because it's the same thing like in Hollywood, you know what they say if you want to like your star to rise, just be in a picture with a really famous person, right? Or like, be in a movie alongside someone who's really famous. Very quickly your star rises, right? It's that same kind of like rubbing off on you effect. When you're with someone who is living their dream, who is like very clear and potently taking action towards their dream, you're in that vibration. And what it will do is it will very quickly actually start to motivate those energy centers within you that clarify that within yourself. So that's just a very practical thing. Now, when it comes to, okay, getting clarity then within yourself, like, well, maybe I've done that, or maybe, maybe I have a sense, but I'm not 100% sure. I do believe very much that we all know exactly what we're supposed to be doing. We all have it. It's so clear. It's the blueprint of our soul, right? However, there are layers of dust on this bookshelf, okay? And so what do we need to do? We need to purify. You need to unplug. You need to get, your 9 to 5 job that you're doing all the time that's stressing you out, that's leaving little space for the extra stuff that you want to do that maybe is your dream, right? Can you take a week off? Can you take 2 weeks off? Can you take a sabbatical? Can you take a leave of absence, right? Or if it's, basically you need to get off of the Ferris wheel of life so that you can be still, so that you can have pause to get in touch with yourself. Purification practices, meditation, especially, like part of those layers is also the busyness of the mind. If you can't calm your mind, you're not really going to get in touch with the deeper layers of truth within yourself, right? So, how can you create the environment, the circumstances that things can slow down, both externally and internally, to get really clear? Because when we're in those calm, clear states, that's when the truth just emerges from us. And, if like stress, we live in a stressed out society, but being in stress all the time is not conducive to getting clarity about our dream or our vision.
I love that. I love what you're sharing, and I think it is a very important time to just gain the clarity forward. And what excites me. I feel for me is like with Cacao, it was a moment, it was very, like you said, it was very clear, but then, it took a little bit to trust in that. But when I look at my mission, right, like in the Mayan Cosmovision, I carry the energy of the plants, of the healer, of the energy of the curanderos. And then I look at where I was born. It's like a small town in Argentina that's all about chocolate. Definitely not ceremonial. It's not your average cup of ceremonial cacao, but hot chocolate, and there's literally like 5 chocolate shops on every block in our downtown area. So there's this deep understanding. It's like right in front of us all along. So I think it's as we maybe create space right now, it's like tuning into what am I excited about to bring forth? What, when we hear somebody else's dream, is it lighting us up? Maybe that tells you something, but then you have to believe it to carry it through. And I remember when I was leaving my restaurant job, I had a period where I would bring ceremonial cacao, and instead of having our espresso right before our shift, I would make everybody a cup of cacao, and we would like set, a moment of gratitude and start our day. So the whole time, I actually have a Biggie Smalls remix.
I've gotten the chance, by the way, to hear it. It's quite fantastic.
Yeah, and I share there, like I remember when I was like my Saturday shift, I was listening to podcasts of Alan Watts, Joe Dispenza, and really vibrating into that frequency that my reality was just something that I was moving through, but it wasn't my real personality. So
Hmm.
I think it is a time to start really embracing who we have come here to be. And if we are feeling, there's a lot of depression and anxiety in our society today, and it's definitely because of the outside world and the way that we're treating our earth and the disconnection that we have from our nature and our earth. But I also think it's that we're not living our mission. So many people are not living their mission, and that's being reflected into how our life is moving through. So it's not about, we're being punished for not living our mission, but it's more like a high calling. So when we hear these different opportunities that the planets are sharing with us, that astrology is sharing with us, I think it's very important to act in the moment in a sense of urgency, not in fight or flight, but something that's been coming up for me a lot is like the importance of urgency of it's right now. It's this very moment right now is all we have. So what can I do in this very moment to really make it the most? And sometimes that's sleeping, sometimes that is resting, sometimes that's running 7 miles, but really tuning into how can I utilize this moment to its highest potential?
Totally. And yeah, I mean, death is one of the greatest teachers, and um, we are not never promised, tomorrow or any day in the future. And so it is definitely moments of intensity and where death is happening on a much more public kind of scale in a lot of ways in the public's eye. Like, what are you waiting for? You have a dream to do something. What are you waiting for? It's not, this is a time of action. One other piece, like piggybacking off of what you said, um, is so the last time that Neptune was in Aries, this is a little crazy. So I was doing a little research. The last time that Neptune in Aries began in 1861, in April of 1861, which was exactly the beginning of the American Civil War, right? So, not to necessarily like predict civil war or anything like that. However, we are kind of in like a trade war, at least in this country, economically with different things, but we are in a very polarized time. And so when Neptune goes into Aries, that part of that, like it's about fighting for your ideals, fighting for what you believe in, like the dream, and really like taking that into your own hands, and really feeling. And so during that period that Neptune was in Aries was 1861 to 1875. And so if you think about Neptune, Neptune is the dream, and Aries is the sign would be for independence, for self-determination, for sovereignty. And so as a result of the Civil War, African Americans in this country got their freedom, right, with the Emancipation Proclamation. So during the Neptune and Aries period, the dream or the ideal of self-determination was took a big step forward, right, in this country. Now, we're re-entering into the energy of like what is the next evolution of that, and so part of the dream of freedom, independence, sovereignty, self-determination, that is going to really be strong over these next 14 years, and about fighting for what you believe in. But to come back to what you were saying, one of the other, this would be a prediction I have, with Neptune going into Aries as well, the creator economy, okay, it's like that the pandemic totally spawned of all these people now, like everyone is an influencer. Everyone is doing something right on Instagram or social media or TikTok or whatever, right? Um, is going to explode even more. I really believe that because again, Neptune is the dream, and Aries, now it's going into Aries, which is like, well, what's my hero's journey? What's my story? What is it that I want to do and assert into the world, right? So I believe that we're actually on the precipice, only at the beginning of this, of people really being the determiners of their fate, of their economic fate, of their business, etc. And so what you were bringing up about like connecting with your dream and, really like at times not being sure, at times feeling like maybe being cautious or whatever. Part of this is like failing forward and just going for it and not needing to get it perfect. Like Aries just goes for it. If so, we all have Aries friends who just go for it and then sometimes have to clean up things afterwards, right? Because they're like, oh, maybe I shouldn't have said it too strongly. But that archetypal energy of going for it is what the invitation is. And so I think we're going to see that as these years unfold of like because like you said, people really, we have a lot of people not in touch with their mission, not in touch with their purpose, just like walking through life. And this is a great opportunity that we can really plug into to, instead of walking through life, create your life. Don't just experience it, create it.
I love that. And well, here we are having this very conversation with like, okay, let's just put it out to the world. And I'm very excited to be doing more of these conversations because I feel it's very easy to just get lost in the matrix. But when you actually hear this, like I know for me right now, I feel so much more in ease of like, okay, it's intense. We got some things happening, many things happening, but I know that I have the strength and the trust that all of this is happening for us, and it's in such a beautiful kind of process that it's not just kind of wiping us, but it's really showing us the steps forward. And when you were talking about death, this we just had one of the last Zapata elders pass uh,
Mm.
that spoke the Zapata language. And it was a big initiation for me because I felt what I was mentioning, this urgency of like, what does this mean for the community? What does this mean for the Amazon? What does this mean for the family? And I feel normally in the past I would get very stuck in the person, the soul that has transcended, and I felt a sense of maturity internally of like, okay, like let ourselves move through the emotions, but how can this be a catalyst to really support the bigger dream and really understanding like what is the soul of this elder of Mukutsawa really wanting to offer the world in this moment in time. And I feel again, it's this urgency of like now, like how are we showing up right now? So I wonder if there's any last little pieces that we want to share to wrap up this beautiful conversation.
Yeah, as I was meditating on the astrology of spring of 2025, which is wild. One phrase really was popping up, which was be the change. And not so like taking the time to purify, to confront your fears, to lean into the resistance and not destroy your fear and kill it and erase it. Don't make that your goal necessarily, right? But instead, if fear comes up, that's courage is um, having fear and doing it anyways, right? So don't wait until you don't have fear, right? take action that is inspired and in alignment with your truth and your heart and what you know to be good. And so be the change. This is a great opportunity these months ahead. The other piece I will say, finally say, is don't be one of the people feeding the fear. You know, things are likely to get crunchy and maybe a little crazy over this season, especially this next month. And so, what are the practices? What are the tools that allow you to stay centered? That you teach with your actions. Let your actions speak and teach others how you show up into a space, how you show up into a conversation, how you show up, leading something, or even consciously following. I don't believe everyone needs to be a leader. If everyone's a leader, no one's a leader, right? So, um, but using the discernment to to really show up and be the embodiment of the future that you envision. Don't wait. Now is the time to really so that we can co-create this.
Beautiful. Thank you. Thank you for that. Yeah, I feel what the four agreements, being impeccable with our word, the way that we show up, and also as you were mentioning social media, this is something I recently shared on my Instagram of understanding like is what I'm sharing here supporting the bigger unification or is this creating separateness? And how can I support the nourishing? Like there's so much information. How can I actually support the people that are witnessing me in this moment? And as you were mentioning, being the inspiration. And sometimes, when I feel separate from the other, I had a ceremony recently that I felt like this big question of at what moment do I become separate from the other, right? When there's judgment involved, when we are in a fight or in an argument, when did I become separate from the other? And I feel Ramdas just always pops up in this process of oneness. And I keep coming back to him when I feel fear coming in because he just reminds us of just coming back to love. And one other message that I got in that ceremony is when there is something that we witness within ourselves that, as I was mentioning, to let go, right? Of like, how do we let go? There are moments where we don't need to do it ourselves, where there's a
Mm.
decomposition that is happening within us, and just witnessing that and letting it be up to the universe to say, I no longer need to carry this because it's no longer part of my story moving forward. It can still be part of my story from the past, but I no longer want the emotional attachment to it and just offer it up and letting, that creative life force, whatever name we utilize, to take care of that and trust that in that process of decomposition.
I love that. Yeah. And with the letting go and the divine, I believe in asking questions. How can I let go? And ask for help. How can I let go? And let life show the answer to you.
Yes. Well, thank you so much, Nick. This has been so beautiful, and I feel so much clarity and what steps to take in the next few months and how to move with these energies. I think it would be great for all of you who have listened to maybe put these dates on the calendar so you're like, oh yeah, here it is coming in. This is what my homework was if I choose it, and this is how I can utilize this energy to support me. You can find the information to connect with Nick Lasky down below, and he does amazing readings, a lot of beautiful courses. So, yeah, thank you so much, Nick, and I look forward to having another beautiful conversation with you in the next few months.
We'll come around again and talk about the summer.
Yes. Let's do it up.
Hey, this was fun.
Thank you all so much. Just bringing one hand to our heart, one hand to our belly. And we'll just take one deep breath in together to integrate this beautiful experience. Inhaling through the nose